Although we should always strive to keep the number of faces in a mesh to a minimum, we will often have to increase them to achieve the model we want. For example, if we want to create a die, it might be quite obvious to us that we should start out with a cube. However, with only 6 faces in the basic cube, that won't be enough to achieve the model we're after. One way to add more faces is to use subdivision. Subdivision allows us to select one or more faces and split them into sets of smaller faces. To subdivide our cube, we must select it and enter Edit mode. With all the elements of the cube selected, we press the right mouse button to produce a pop-up menu. The first entry in this menu is Subdivide. Selecting this will divide every face in the cube into 4 smaller faces. The last op panel has several parameters. Number of cuts specifies the number of cuts to the existing selected edges. In most cases, this will be the only parameter we'll need to adjust. A smoothness value other than 0 creates a spherification effect. The maximum value of 1.0 will turn our cube into a sphere if we've created enough faces. Create n-gons allows the subdivision process to create n-gons where necessary. If this is unchecked, all the newly created faces will be tris or quads. To demonstrate this option, we'll select just one face on our cube and subdivide it. As we would expect with number of cuts set to 1, our face has been subdivided into 4 faces. But what about the other faces of the cube? Are they affected by this latest subdivision? It may appear that they are not. But if we select one of our newly created faces and then choose Select, Select Similar, Polygon Sides, making sure that the last op panel's Compare is set to Equal, we'll see that the faces touching the newly subdivided face are no longer quads. In fact, if we switch to Vertex selection, we can see that those faces that were not selected by Polygon Sides have 5 vertices. In other words, they have changed from quads to n-gons. But if we backtrack and redo the subdivision with Create n-gons unchecked, Blender is forced into changing from creating n-gons to creating tris, making the changes to adjacent faces more obvious. Earlier, we stated that subdivision requires us to select one or more faces, but in fact, the very minimum we can subdivide is a single edge. And if we don't allow n-gons, we can see that each of the faces common to the selected edge needs to be divided into 3 tris. And if we increase the number of cuts, we get both quads and tris. If we select 2 opposite edges to subdivide, we split the face they share into 2 or more quad faces, while the original adjacent faces become n-gons, or a collection of tris and quads. The next possibility for an initial selection is 2 adjacent edges. This is where the quad corner type field in the last op panel becomes relevant. Each option in the drop-down list creates a different set of face cuts. Selecting 3 sides, subdivision creates a single cutting method, which only varies with the number of cuts value. When edges or faces are selected, the fractal value is used to randomly move the vertices after the basic subdivide operation is complete. Along normals tends to force the vertex movement created when using Fractal to be in the same direction as the vertex normals rather than in a random direction. A value of 0.0 allows a fully random direction to be used. A value of 1.00 forces movement to be completely in the direction of the normal. Values in between control how close movement is to the normal's direction. Random seed is the initializing value for the random number generator used when employing the fractal option. Let's take a look at one interesting use of the subdivide operation. We'll start in top view by pressing 7 on the numpad and add a circle object with only 6 vertices. In edit mode, we'll select all of the vertices, and hence all the edges, and perform a subdivision with the number of cuts set to 2. Now, if we set smoothness to 1, this rearranges the position of the vertices to create a more perfect circle. That, for the moment, is all we will discuss in the way of adding new vertices, edges, and faces to a mesh. But we will discover many more options when we describe the tools in the Edit Mode toolbar. To move a single selected vertex, we can use the Move tool in the toolbar. Or we can press G and optionally a direction, that is X, Y, or Z. When we move a vertex very close to another existing vertex, we have the option to merge them into a single vertex. To do this, we can activate the merge icon at the top right of the 3D viewport. Then, by clicking on Options to display a panel of parameters, we can see a threshold field. The value here determines how close our two vertices must be to each other before Blender will merge them into a single vertex. We'll set it quite high to 0.1 to make merging easier to demonstrate. By the way, the Auto Merge checkbox is just another way of switching on or off automatic merging. To demonstrate, we'll move to top view by pressing 7 on the numpad. With the statistics text visible, we can see that there are 121 vertices in the default 10 by 10 grid. Now, after selecting a vertex and pressing G to move it, we'll place it as close as we can to another vertex. Because we are in top view, movement will be restricted to X and Y directions only. When we press the left mouse button to complete the move, we should see the vertex count reduce to 120 as two vertices become 1. You may even notice that the edge count has also reduced by 1 to 219. Merging also works when we drag an edge or a face. There's one key combination that works differently in edit mode than it does in object mode. When we press G twice, the vertex can only be dragged along the edges to which it is connected. Normally, this method of dragging will only take us as far as the next vertex, or the original position of the vertex we are currently moving. However, if we hold down the Alt key after dragging has started, we can go beyond those limits. Of course, we won't want to move the vertex past an existing one, since this will probably really mess up our geometry. But this option is useful if we want to move into an unoccupied space. GG and the Alt key also work when we've selected an edge or face, but are probably of more limited use.